Aloha Church, we're back here with Dr. Joe Grana. He is the assistant to the president of the University of Hope International University. And he is a friend and mentor and professor of mine. And many of you remember him from being here last year, preaching and sharing with us and being with us and our elders and encouraging us. And so, Joe, thank you so much for letting me ask you these questions and just pick your brain about the book of Revelation. It's an easy book to understand.
Yeah, it was simple. Yeah, very
Well, one of the questions I always get asked, or that always comes up, or I probably see it more on social media than probably I get asked, either on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever social media accounts. But it's as we look at what's going on today, we see this idea in scripture about the mark of the beast, and we also see this beast. Like, can you speak that? Who is this beast? Who was the beast? And what is the mark of the beast? And what is the 666? And how does all that play into what's going on?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Who's the beast? It's 666. That's his number. Although there are some textual variants in there, Bryan, where it's 661.
Oh,
which is kind of interesting, or even 616, I guess. I think that's maybe even more accurate. I might have missaid that, but there are some texts that don't have 666. They have a different number. So you could go through the debate of that. Well, through the centuries, people have tried to figure that out because, again, people believe that all this was going to happen in their generation. I don't know of a generation that did not believe that through the 2,000 years since Christianity started, since Jesus ascended to heaven. So 666, where does it come in? For many years, on and off, it's always been the Pope in the Catholic Church. We have, in more recent times, it was Napoleon. It was Adolf Hitler. This was kind of an interesting one to me, is that if you took the letter A and gave it the equivalent of 101 and Z at 126, and you take Hitler, and it ends up being 666. So it said Hitler was the beast. Henry Kissinger, when he was Secretary of the State in the United States, was considered to be the secretary, the beast. I have a book in my library of Kissinger being the beast. Reagan was considered to be the beast because his Ronald Wilson Reagan, each of the names that he has 6 letters in it. So he's 666. There used to be a highway in the United States that was 666, and they changed the number. I don't know what it is now, but they decided not to keep 666. And a lot of times when you get change or something and it comes up 666, or it costs you 666, or it comes close, well, I'm glad that was 667, not 666. Didn't want to have the mark of the beast. So who is it? It's been viewed in a lot of different ways by a lot of different people through the centuries. But again, I think we go back to a principle that we had in our first session of hermeneutics, is what could have meant back then, and how does that apply to us today? And my personal view is, and I don't want to go into all the technicalities, get into all the weeds of it, but I believe that it had to do with the emperor of the time, whose name was Domitian, that he is the 666. And his name doesn't come up with that number, but Nero Caesar does. And it was believed, there was a legend after Nero committed suicide that he was going to come back revived. And when Domitian became the emperor, many people believe that he was Nero revived, because Nero was a pretty bad dude. And the story is that he lit up his parties in Rome with burning Christians up on poles. Not a nice guy. And Domitian wasn't any better. In fact, he was a little bit worse. So they thought he was revived. And so I personally believe that 666 for the people then had to do with the Roman Empire, and particularly the Roman emperor of that day.
Do you think in some way that it maybe could have been some type of, because it's apocalyptic literature, which was common during John's day, and even some of the apocryphal books talks about some of these apocalyptic, languages or language. But do you think it could have been some type of code for the Christians so that maybe the Roman Empire wouldn't find out what John was talking about, what God gave John to write down?
Yeah, I think that's part of the point of the whole book of Revelation, that it's in the symbolic language that only the people who understood the symbols would get, and those who didn't wouldn't get it. The Christians would understand these symbols because of their culture and their time and age, and that the Romans, who are in control at that time, wouldn't, because Revelation is kind of subversive, if you will. It's even it is prophesying the fall of the Roman Empire. And the Christians are being persecuted enough, but if it was totally understood what was being said here, they'd say they're going to go in and try to do a little bit more extinguishing. So I think, yeah, it is kind of code language, if you will, because of the symbols.
And as we look now, I mean, you look at credit cards, right? That was, well, in the 70s or 80s when credit cards became real popular. And then it was like, oh, there's a microchip on it. And somehow, if you look at it, there's 666 in it. And that's the mark of the beast. And current days, there's microchips you can put in your dogs or things like that. That's the mark of the beast. What are some other things that people have thought throughout the years that are potentially the mark of the beast?
There's even been a claim in the past. I haven't read this recently, maybe it's still a view, that there was a computer in Switzerland that was kind of controlling everything in the world, and that was the beast, this massive computer that kind of will take over the world. But you have in Revelation the mark on the hand, on the forehead, and that actually happened back then. When the emperor wanted some kind of emperor worship, and the people would have to go and burn incense, and then they would get a mark. And if they didn't have that, they couldn't do business. That was part of the problem, is Christians were being kept from doing business or having their businesses frequented because they didn't do some of these cultural things that were expected of them. And there was a debate at that time. Well, we know Caesar's not a god. It doesn't matter. This doesn't mean anything. We'll do it. Just, appease them and go on. And others would say, no, you can't do this. This is saying that somebody else is more than Jesus. And, it's almost like blasphemy. So there was a debate even among the Christians of the time as to whether they should participate or not, some justifying it and others saying you can't justify it. So that marking was there. So again, that takes us back to that meant something to them because it was something they lived with. It wasn't just something that was going to happen 2,000 years from then.
Yeah. And I suppose if the powers that be came and said, listen, you have to be marked in order to eat or drink or do business nowadays, I don't see is that even a possibility?
Yeah, well, I think that there's one thing true, I think, with prophecy is that sometimes it can have a double fulfillment. It can be filled in a particular time and be fulfilled again. Let me give you an example, if I may. You go to Isaiah 7:14, a young woman, a virgin, will conceive, give birth to a son, call him Emmanuel, God with us. And then Matthew in 1:23 says, oh, that's what talking about Jesus. Well, the original was given to somebody in Isaiah's time, King Ahaz, and I believe it was fulfilled then. I mean, it was a word for King Ahaz at that time, and that was fulfilled. But Matthew's also saying, I think that this finds fulfillment in Jesus, or at least Jesus fulfills what that was talking about in that a virgin conceived and God is with us. So it is possible. It may be, I think in regard to your question, that something would be fulfilled at the time it was given, but also fulfilled at a future point.
And that double fulfillment, that's happened a lot of other times with prophecies throughout history, has it not?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And so if we look at this.
But I won't speculate on that. I want to stick with the text.
Right.
get there as best I can. And whatever happens in addition to that, I don't know. And that's up to God to do, but I can't speculate on it.
And that, I think, is always a good reminder for all of us who love God's word, is to stick with the text.
Yes.
What is the text saying? What is it meaning? Because once we start putting cultural events into the text, then, like, yeah, if I suspect that none of John's readers would have ever thought about the credit card, or people say
No.
what Bill Gates is going on in some market. They never would have had that imagery in mind, but everyone would understand what God was speaking through John.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And some of the other images, some people say, well, they're helicopters or this and that. That would have meant nothing to those people. And whether you can interpret it that other way, I'm a little more skeptical. But again, I think when you approach Revelation and you approach these things, you have to be humble. Nobody knows. I think there's part of the problem, Bryan, is when people become dogmatic, become so engulfed in it that they're just obsessed by it. I think that becomes a problem. So I have opinions, but I'm not going to say I know everything, because I don't know it. I'm going to say what I think, but I may be wrong. I like what Leonard Sweet says. He says something like 90% of what I say is the truth and 10% is heresy. I just don't know which is which. What I like about that is it's humble. I have my view and I believe it's right. I mean, we all think we are right. That's why we have the view, even though we may not be sure. But to have the humility to say, yeah, I may be wrong, and I need to be open to that and not be so dogmatic where I think somebody is just terrible or a heretic because they don't think exactly the way I do, particularly in an area like this. It's apocalyptic and metaphoric.
And yeah, I love that approach, because when you talk about humility, that's when conversations happen. I think
Yes.
what happens when we become so dogmatic about whether it's theology, whether it's politics, whatever it is, it's like the conversation ends. But if you come with a humble approach, that's when the conversation starts.
Yeah, because then we can talk to one another, and I would say, "Oh, you got a pretty good point there," and I'll move over a little bit. Or,
Yeah.
Bryan, no, I don't think that at all. And then I say, but at least you dialogue and you're open-minded. Always to have an open mind. I mean, the only place a closed mind, I guess, is Jesus is Lord, the bodily resurrection of Jesus. We're going to stand. That's a hill we're going to die on.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
other hills, we don't need to die on them. And in fact, we may be hurting the gospel because of it. If I die on this hill of my particular view of the prophecy, and I'm wrong, then, which people have been through the centuries, it hurts the credibility of the church and of the gospel.
Yeah, what a great encouragement message for us in terms of how we spread the gospel and how we live our lives for Christ. That let's approach it with humility. Let's listen to people to
Yes.
understand what they're saying, right? Not to just prove them wrong, so to speak, but to really hear what they're saying, understand what they're saying. It's like in a relationship, right? With me and Kaz, if I know what I'm supposed to do when we're discussing things. I'm supposed to say, all right, not arguing, just discussing. Like what I'm hearing you say is that is a much more fruitful approach to resolving conflict than, no, listen. Let me tell you how it is.
Exactly.
Not that I'd ever done that or anything. I'm just
No, I'm sure you haven't. Well, and that's important about dialogue. And dogmatism gets you in a position where there is no conversation. And you're generally not going to win somebody over with that kind of approach. You're going to, if somebody believes that they're actually listened to, they'll be more apt to listen to you. And there could be more influence take place there. But if you just say, this is the way it is, and you're an idiot if you don't think so, then people put up their defense mechanisms, even if you have something that's a worthwhile argument.
Oh, that's an encouraging word. And let's always try to live our lives with humility and honesty. And the desire to be in relationships with those who think differently than us.
Yeah. To speak the truth with love.
Yeah.
You speak the truth, but you can do it with love. There's one way to speak it. It's pretty condescending or pretty negative, but there's another way to speak the truth in love. And also, this is what I found in my teaching through the years, Bryan, and through my own life. It's always a development. I'm always progressing. I'm always developing. My views have changed through the years. I've grown, matured. I said, oh, I thought that was right, 20 years ago, and I was off base, And if you can't just say, okay, now I got it, and it's all settled. That's what we want to do. We want to put God in that box. We want to put views in boxes, and then, okay, now I don't have to think about it anymore. But you can't put God in a box. You can't put theology in a box. And it's a developmental thing. Maybe you can't handle today what you can handle in 20 years. Maybe life situation helps you understand it more. As I've seen in students, they will say some things that I disagree with, but I want them, I came to realize it's a developmental thing. I want to guide them. And of course, I don't want them to be gone off on way off over the cliff. So I'm not talking about that sort of thing, but they might see it that way now, but in 5 years, they're probably going to change their view if they keep an open mind. So we got to give people a chance to grow and develop. I didn't get where I'm at right away. It took time, and it's still happening. You didn't get where you are automatically. It took time. You're developing. We need to give other people the chance to do that too.
I love that. I love that. No, that gives us a lot to think about, a lot to process, and kind of just comes back to the desire to know who Jesus is and a desire to continue learning about him intellectually as well as growing in our relationship with our Savior. And what a great word. So thank you for sharing that,